I never thought I would see my own name listed as a defendant on legal documents filed by my parents. The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after I closed on my first home. Working since 16. Never asking for help. Putting myself through college while juggling 2 jobs. All that sacrifice to finally achieve my dream of homeownership at 28, only to be served with papers demanding I sign over my house to my sister Amanda. My unemployed sister, who has never held a steady job in her life. My parents were actually suing me for buying myself a home with my own money. Growing up in Westlake, Ohio, I always knew something was different about how my parents treated me compared to my sister Amanda. 4 years younger than me, Amanda somehow always ended up with the bigger bedroom, the newer clothes, and definitely more of my parents' attention. While most parents try to at least pretend they don't have a favorite child, mine never bothered with that charade. I remember my 16th birthday clearly. While my friends received cars, parties, or at least some acknowledgement of the milestone, I got a job application packet for the local grocery store and a lecture about responsibility. "Marina, it's time you started contributing," my father said, sliding the application across the kitchen table like he was offering me a great opportunity. "Your sister will need college money in a few years, and we all need to pitch in." I didn't point out that nobody had mentioned saving for my college education, which was only 2 years away. Instead, I dutifully filled out the application, interviewed, and started bagging groceries after school and on weekends. My first paycheck went toward a used laptop I needed for schoolwork. When I asked if I could use some of my earnings to join the school photography club, my mother's response was cutting. "Marina, don't be selfish. You know we're saving for the future." The future, I soon learned, rarely included plans for me. Meanwhile, Amanda floated through her teenage years, taking dance lessons, cheerleading, and attending sleepovers. When she turned 16, there was no job application. Instead, she received a sweet 16 party with 50 guests and a promise that they were working on getting her a car for when she got her license. "Your sister is more delicate than you," my mother would explain whenever I questioned the disparity. "She needs more support. You're our rock, Marina. You can handle things on your own." And handle things I did. By 18, I had saved enough from my grocery store job and a weekend gig waiting tables to cover my first semester at the state university. I applied for every scholarship available, wrote countless essays, and secured enough financial aid to make college possible, though certainly not comfortable. My parents attended my high school graduation, sitting quietly while other families cheered and took photos. "We need to leave early," my father announced as soon as my name was called, and I crossed the stage. "Amanda has a dance recital this afternoon." College was a blur of classes, study sessions, and work. I took on a 3rd job during the summer, interning at a marketing firm while keeping my grocery and waitressing positions. My course load was heavy, chosen specifically to allow me to graduate in 3.5 years instead of 4, saving precious tuition dollars. I called home once a week out of obligation more than desire for connection. These calls followed a predictable pattern. Brief questions about my studies, followed by extended updates on Amanda's life and achievements, regardless of how minor. Amanda got an A on her history project. My mother would gush, never mentioning that I had made the dean's list for the 3rd semester in a row. During my junior year, Amanda started college at an expensive private university 3 states away. My parents drove her there, helping set up her dorm room and taking her shopping for new clothes and decor. I learned about this through Facebook photos, as no one had mentioned these plans during our weekly calls. 3 months later, Amanda decided her major wasn't the right fit and dropped out. My parents paid the cancellation fees without complaint and welcomed her back home. This pattern repeated twice more at different schools, each time with my parents covering all expenses. I graduated with minimal student loan debt thanks to my multiple jobs and aggressive scholarship applications. The marketing firm where I had interned offered me an entry-level position, and I accepted immediately. My parents attended my college graduation but left immediately after the ceremony to attend one of Amanda's friends' birthday parties. For the next 4 years, I lived in a tiny studio apartment, putting in extra hours at work to secure promotions and gradually increase my salary. I maintained a cordial but distant relationship with my family, driving the 2 hours home for major holidays and occasional Sunday dinners. These visits were awkward at best, painful at worst, as I continued to feel like an outsider in my own family. Amanda cycled through jobs as frequently as she had colleges. Retail positions lasted a few weeks before she decided the hours were too demanding. Office jobs ended because managers didn't understand her creative process. Through it all, she continued living at home, with my parents covering her car payments, phone bill, and providing a rent-free existence. I saved carefully, building an emergency fund, then a down payment fund for a future home. I tracked expenses in detailed spreadsheets, brought lunch to work instead of buying it, and limited my social activities to free or low-cost options. My dream of homeownership felt distant but achievable with enough discipline. Last winter, after receiving a modest but welcome promotion, I decided it was time to begin house hunting. Nothing extravagant, just a small place of my own where I could build equity instead of paying rent. I contacted a realtor, secured pre-approval for a mortgage, and began viewing properties on weekends. When I mentioned my house hunting during a Sunday dinner at my parents' home, the reaction was strangely muted. "Houses are very expensive," my mother said, frowning, "and such a commitment for someone your age." "Marina always thinks she knows what she's doing," my father added, exchanging a look with Amanda that I couldn't quite interpret. I brushed off their lack of enthusiasm, accustomed to their tepid response to my achievements. What I didn't know then was that my innocent announcement had set in motion a series of events that would eventually land us all in court. It was during a conversation with my Aunt Judy at a family gathering that I first realized something was amiss. She pulled me aside during a cousin's birthday party, her expression concerned. "Marina, is everything okay with your sister moving in with you? Your mother mentioned there might be some tension." I stared at her, confused. "Amanda moving in with me? I don't even have a place yet. I just started looking." Aunt Judy's face fell. "Oh dear," I thought. "Your mother said you were buying a place for both of you, that you'd be sharing it. She's been talking about it for months." My heart pounded as I processed this information. Without my knowledge or consent, my parents had apparently promised Amanda that my future home would somehow be hers as well. They had been telling family members about this arrangement, as if it were a settled fact. "That's news to me," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady despite my growing anger. "I'm buying a place for myself, with my own money that I've saved. Amanda has never been part of that plan." Aunt Judy squeezed my arm sympathetically. "Your parents have always had this strange idea that family takes care of family means you taking care of Amanda. I just assumed you'd agreed to it." As I drove home that night, pieces began falling into place. The lukewarm response to my homeownership plans, the strange looks between my father and Amanda, the years of being told I was the strong one who could handle things while Amanda needed support. They had been grooming me my entire life to be my sister's keeper. After months of searching, I finally found the perfect starter home. It wasn't fancy by any means. A 2-bedroom fixer-upper built in the 1970s with outdated kitchen appliances and carpeting that had seen better days. But it had good bones, as my realtor Tanya kept pointing out, and the location in a quiet neighborhood with mature trees was ideal. Best of all, it was within my budget. I remember the moment I decided this would be my home. Standing in the small backyard, looking at the modest deck that needed some boards replaced, I could envision summer evenings sitting outside with a book and a glass of wine. The maple tree would provide perfect shade, and there was even space for a small garden. For the first time in my life, I could create a space that was truly mine, where no one could tell me I was taking up too much room or being selfish with resources. The closing process was nerve-wracking. Every email from the mortgage company sent my anxiety spiraling, convinced they would find some reason to deny me this dream. But all those years of careful financial management paid off. My credit score was excellent, my debt-to-income ratio ideal, and my employment history stable. When I finally signed the closing documents and received the keys, I sat in my car and cried from sheer relief and happiness. The first person I called was my friend Beth, who had been supportive throughout the entire process. She brought champagne that evening, and we toasted to new beginnings as we sat on the floor of my empty living room. "You did this all by yourself, Marina," she said, raising her plastic cup. "Not many people our age can say that." Her words filled me with pride. I had done this myself, despite having no support system, no family financial help, and no safety net. Every dollar of the down payment represented extra shifts, packed lunches, and sacrificed vacations. After a week of painting and cleaning, I invited my family to see my new home. I wasn't expecting effusive praise, but I thought they might at least acknowledge the achievement. Instead, my parents arrived with tight smiles and critical eyes. "It's smaller than it looked in the photos you sent," my mother said, peering into the kitchen. "And this wallpaper is hideous. I'm planning to remove it next month," I explained, trying not to let her comments dampen my enthusiasm. "I have to budget the renovations carefully." My father walked through the rooms silently, checking closets and looking under the sink as if inspecting for defects he could point out. Amanda trailed behind, making occasional comments about the weird layout and questioning why I would want to live in such an old place. "Some people have all the luck," she said, running a finger along the countertop and examining it for dust. "Must be nice to have your own house while some of us are still stuck at home." I bit back a retort about how luck had nothing to do with it. How I had worked multiple jobs since I was 16 while she had been given everything. How I had sacrificed and saved while she dropped out of colleges and quit jobs on a whim. Instead, I offered to show them the small second bedroom I was setting up as a home office. "This would make a nice bedroom for someone," my mother commented, giving Amanda a meaningful look that made my stomach tighten with apprehension. The visit concluded with an awkward dinner at a nearby restaurant, where my parents asked pointed questions about my mortgage terms and whether I had considered how difficult it would be to maintain a house on my own. I answered politely but vaguely, increasingly certain that something was off about their reaction. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Amanda needs to move out of our house. When can she move in with you? The second bedroom would be perfect for her." I stared at the message in disbelief, then carefully composed a response. "Mom, I'm not looking for a roommate right now. The second bedroom is going to be my office. I need that space for work." The reply came quickly. "She's your sister. Family helps family. Your father and I have supported her all these years. It's your turn now." My hands shook as I typed. I bought this house with my own money for myself. I never agreed to share it with Amanda or anyone else. What followed was a barrage of texts from both parents, ranging from guilt-tripping, "After everything we've done for you," to outright anger, "You've always been selfish." I eventually stopped responding, hoping they would calm down and realize the absurdity of their expectation. They didn't. Instead, the pressure escalated. My mother called daily, each conversation beginning reasonably before devolving into emotional manipulation. My father sent emails listing all the ways I was disappointing the family. Amanda started posting passive-aggressive social media updates about toxic siblings and blood being thicker than water. I was bewildered by the intensity of their reaction. This wasn't just disappointment, it was outrage, as if I had reneged on a promise or stolen something that belonged to them. It wasn't until a conversation with a family friend that the full picture became clear. Gloria had been my mother's friend since college, and had always been kind to me. She called one evening, ostensibly to congratulate me on my new home. "I have to tell you something," she said after some small talk. "I'm concerned about what your parents have been saying." "About me not letting Amanda move in?" I asked wearily. "No, it's more than that. They've been telling people for months that you were buying a house for Amanda to live in, that it was always the plan. Your mother told me at Christmas that they had it all worked out, that the girls would be living together in their new house." My blood ran cold. "What? I never said anything like that. This is the first I'm hearing of it." Gloria sighed. I was afraid of that. They made it sound like it was your idea, that you wanted to help your sister get on her feet. They've told everyone in their social circle, even your extended family. After we hung up, I sat on my new couch in my new home, feeling a sickening combination of anger and betrayal. My parents hadn't just misunderstood my intentions, they had fabricated an entire narrative without my knowledge or consent. They had made promises on my behalf to Amanda, and announced these promises to others as if they were facts. For years, I had accepted their favoritism toward Amanda as hurtful but ultimately their prerogative. This was different. This was actively attempting to appropriate my accomplishment and hand it to my sister simply because she wanted it. And based on their reaction to my refusal, they genuinely believed they had the right to do so. That night, I made a decision. I would not be bullied or manipulated into giving up what I had worked so hard to achieve. I would establish clear boundaries with my family, even if it meant damaging our already fragile relationship. What I didn't realize was that this was only the beginning of a battle that would become far more public and painful than I could have imagined. The day after my conversation with Gloria, my phone began ringing with calls from relatives I rarely heard from. My Aunt Patrice called first, her voice tight with disapproval. "Marina, I just spoke with your mother. How could you go back on your word like this? Amanda has been counting on moving into that house with you." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Aunt Patrice, I never gave my word about anything like that. I bought this house for myself. My parents and Amanda created this plan without ever discussing it with me." "That's not what your mother said," she replied skeptically. "She said you've known for years that this was the arrangement, that you agreed to it." Similar conversations followed with my grandmother, 2 cousins, and even my father's brother, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Each time, I patiently explained that I had never made any such agreement, but it was clear most of them didn't believe me. After all, why would my parents lie about something like this? The calls were stressful enough, but then came the social media onslaught. Amanda began posting vague but pointed status updates about betrayal and selfishness. She never mentioned me by name, but all our mutual connections knew exactly who she was referring to. Comments poured in offering sympathy and support, painting her as the victim of my cruelty. "Stay strong, honey. Some people forget where they came from. Blood is supposed to be thicker than water. Shame on her. You deserved better. Family should support each other no matter what." Each comment felt like a tiny dagger, especially knowing that the narrative they were responding to was completely fabricated. I considered posting my own explanation, but ultimately decided against it. Engaging in a public family dispute would only escalate the situation and make me look defensive. Instead, I tried once more to reason with my parents. I invited them to meet me for coffee at a neutral location, hoping that a face-to-face conversation might break through the impasse. They arrived 20 minutes late, already wearing expressions of aggrieved disappointment. I wanted to clear up this misunderstanding. I began carefully after we'd ordered. "I'm not sure how this idea started that I was buying a house for Amanda to live in, but that was never my intention or my plan." My father's face reddened. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. You knew what was expected of you. We've supported you your entire life." I blinked in surprise. "Dad, I've been financially independent since I was 18. I paid my own way through college. I've never asked you for money." "We gave you a home," my mother interjected. "We fed you, clothed you, raised you. And this is how you repay us? By turning your back on your sister when she needs you?" "I'm not turning my back on Amanda," I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. "But I'm not responsible for providing her with housing. She's 24 years old. I was working 2 jobs at her age." "Your sister is different," my mother snapped. "She has a sensitive soul. Not everyone can be cold and calculating like you, Marina." The conversation deteriorated from there, with my parents refusing to acknowledge that their expectations were unreasonable. They insisted that I had always known this was the plan, that I was being deliberately obtuse and selfish. When I pointed out that they had never once mentioned this plan to me before I bought the house, They claimed they had dropped plenty of hints, and I should have understood. I left the coffee shop feeling drained and no closer to resolution. It was becoming clear that logic and reason weren't going to work with them. They had constructed a reality where I was the villain, and nothing I said was going to change their minds. 2 days later, things escalated dramatically. I was in a team meeting at work when our receptionist called to say my family was in the lobby, insisting on seeing me immediately. Embarrassed and confused, I excused myself from the meeting and went to the front desk to find my parents and Amanda standing there, my father's face flushed with anger. "We need to talk now," he said loudly enough that several of my colleagues turned to look. "I'm in the middle of a workday," I hissed. "This isn't appropriate." "You've been ignoring our calls," my mother said. "You've left us no choice." My boss, Susan, emerged from her office, drawn by the commotion. "Is everything okay, Marina?" Before I could answer, my father turned to her. "Did you know your employee is refusing to help her homeless sister? After everything we've done for her?" I felt my face burn with humiliation. "Amanda is not homeless. She lives with you, as she always has." "Not anymore," my mother announced. "We've decided she needs to learn independence. She's moving out, and you have the perfect space for her." Susan looked uncomfortable, but professional. "I think this is a personal matter that should be handled outside of work hours. Marina is in the middle of an important meeting right now." My father took a step toward her. "This is a family emergency." "No, it's not," I said firmly. "And I need you to leave now before you cause any more of a scene." Amanda, who had been silent until now, suddenly burst into tears. "See how she treats me, her own sister? I just need a place to stay until I find my feet, and she won't even consider it." By this point, most of my office was watching the spectacle. I could see curiosity and judgment in their eyes, and my carefully constructed professional reputation felt like it was crumbling around me. Security was eventually called to escort them out, with my father threatening to make things difficult for me if I didn't do the right thing. I returned to my meeting, mortified, and spent the rest of the day fielding concerned questions from colleagues and attempting to focus on work, despite my churning anxiety. That night, I could barely sleep. The public humiliation at my workplace had shaken me deeply, but it also strengthened my resolve. My parents had crossed a line, and it was now clear they would use any means to pressure me into giving in to their demands. The next morning, I returned to work to find an email from my boss asking to meet with me. My stomach dropped, fearing that the previous day's incident had damaged my standing at the company. Susan welcomed me into her office with a concerned expression. "Marina, I wanted to check in after yesterday. That seemed like an intense situation." I nodded, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm so sorry about that. My family is going through some issues right now. It won't happen again." "I'm not concerned about that," she said kindly. "I'm concerned about you. Is everything okay?" Her unexpected kindness nearly broke me. I'd been handling this situation alone, and it felt overwhelming to have someone simply ask if I was all right. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything, the words pouring out in a rush, from my childhood as the less favored child to the current house situation. When I finished, Susan looked thoughtful. "My sister and I had similar issues growing up, though not quite so extreme. Have you considered getting some legal advice, just to understand your options and rights?" I hadn't thought of that, but it made sense. If my parents were willing to show up at my workplace, what else might they do? I thanked Susan for her understanding and support, and that evening, I researched family attorneys in my area. The pressure from my family continued unabated. Relatives I barely knew called to express their disappointment in me. Friends from high school messaged to ask why I was being so cruel to my sister. Even my landlord from my previous apartment contacted me, saying my mother had called asking if I had really bought a house or if I was lying about it. The constant stress began affecting my sleep and my health. I started having anxiety attacks, waking up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, worried about what new tactic my family might try next. I installed a security system in my new home, no longer certain they wouldn't simply show up and try to force their way in. Then came the most shocking discovery yet. I received a call from my cousin Jason, who had always been kind to me despite living in another state. "Marina, I thought you should see something," he said, his voice concerned. "I'm forwarding you an email your mother sent to the entire extended family yesterday." The email appeared in my inbox moments later, and what I read made my blood run cold. It was a lengthy message, detailing how I had abandoned my family after they had sacrificed everything for me. It claimed I had received substantial financial support throughout college, a complete fabrication, and that I had verbally agreed multiple times to help Amanda once I was established in my career. Most disturbing of all, the email included personal financial details that I had never shared with my parents, including the approximate amount of my savings. "Marina has secretly accumulated significant wealth while watching her sister struggle," my mother had written. "She has the means to help, but chooses not to out of spite and selfishness." I was baffled as to how they had obtained this information until I remembered the stack of mail that had gone missing when I was moving. It had included bank statements and investment reports that I had planned to file. At the time, I assumed they'd been lost in the chaos of moving, but now I realized my parents must have taken them during one of their visits to my old apartment. They had been going through my personal mail, stealing my financial documents, and using the information to build their case against me to the family. The invasion of privacy felt like a physical blow. These were the people who were supposed to love and protect me, yet they were systematically attacking my character, my privacy, and now my peace of mind. That night, I made a decision. I would no longer attempt to reason with them or defend myself against their accusations. It was time to protect myself legally. I had no idea then just how necessary that protection would soon become. The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was running late for work, grabbing my coffee and keys, when I noticed it propped against my front door. No return address, just my name and address printed in unfamiliar handwriting. Assuming it was neighborhood information or perhaps a welcome packet from the Homeowners Association, I tossed it onto the passenger seat of my car and forgot about it until that evening. When I finally opened it after dinner, my hands began to shake so badly that I dropped the contents onto my kitchen floor. Legal documents. A formal complaint filed with the county court. The plaintiffs, Thomas and Diane Walker. My parents. The defendant, Marina Walker. Me. The accusation, breach of verbal contract, and unjust enrichment. According to the complaint, my parents had provided me with substantial financial assistance throughout my life, with the understanding that I would provide housing for Amanda Walker upon acquisition of real property. They claimed they had given me money for college. False. With the explicit verbal agreement that I would provide for my sister later in life. They were demanding that I either transfer the deed of my home to Amanda or pay her an amount equivalent to the home's value. It was so absurd that I actually laughed out loud, a sharp, hysterical sound that echoed in my empty kitchen. They were suing me. My own parents were taking me to court to try to force me to give my house to my sister. I immediately called the attorney I had consulted after the workplace incident, Natalie Jameson, and arranged to meet her the next morning. She reviewed the documents with a frown that deepened as she turned each page. "This is unusual," she said finally, looking up at me. Family disputes over property aren't uncommon, but they typically involve inheritance or divorce, not a case where parents are trying to force one adult child to provide for another. "Can they actually win this?" I asked, my voice tight with anxiety. "Based on what you've told me, and what's in these documents, no. They don't have evidence of any agreement, because no such agreement existed. You paid for your own education and your own home. But that doesn't mean this won't be stressful and potentially expensive to defend." We discussed strategy, and Natalie began preparing our response to the complaint. I left her office feeling slightly more confident, but still shaken by the escalation. My parents had moved from emotional manipulation to legal action, a step I never would have anticipated even a month ago. The situation became even more surreal the following week, when the local newspaper ran a story about the case. Someone, and I had a pretty good idea who, had tipped off a reporter about the unusual family dispute, positioning it as a human interest story about family obligations in modern America. The article was ostensibly balanced, including quotes from both sides, but the framing subtly positioned me as cold and unfeeling. While financial independence is a worthy goal, where should family obligation enter the equation? The reporter wrote. The Walkers raised their daughter and supported her dreams. Is it unreasonable to expect some reciprocity when it comes to their younger daughter's needs? The fact that I had received no financial support from my parents after high school, that I had worked multiple jobs to put myself through college, that Amanda was perfectly capable of working, but chose not to, none of that was mentioned. Instead, the story painted me as successful but selfish, unwilling to help my struggling sister, despite having the means to do so. The article included a photo of Amanda looking vulnerable and sad, sitting on our parents' porch swing. There was no photo of me, just a mention that I had declined to be photographed for this story, making it seem as though I was hiding from public scrutiny rather than simply never having been contacted by the reporter. The impact was immediate and devastating. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from people who had read the article. Some were supportive, but many were critical or questioning. Colleagues gave me strange looks in the hallway at work. A neighbor I had just met left a note suggesting local charities that help families in crisis. The most painful response came from my grandmother, who called me in tears after reading the article. Marina, is this true? Are you really refusing to help your sister? I raised your father to believe in family above all else. I tried to explain my side, that Amanda wasn't helpless or in crisis, that my parents had been manipulating the situation, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. The narrative my parents had constructed was powerful and aligned with deeply held values about family obligation, especially from older generations. The lawsuit also began attracting attention on social media. Local community groups shared the newspaper article, leading to heated debates in the comments section. People who had never met me felt entitled to weigh in on my character and choices. Amanda's posts continued, now with added legitimacy from the lawsuit and media coverage. She positioned herself as the victim of my success, garnering sympathy and support from strangers. I began avoiding public places in my small community, tired of the stares and whispers. Grocery shopping became an exercise in anxiety, each trip a potential encounter with someone who had read about my heartless behavior toward my family. My home, which had been my haven, began to feel like a fortress I was defending, rather than a safe space I had created. Natalie encouraged me to focus on the legal aspects rather than the court of public opinion. What matters is what we can prove in court, she assured me. And the facts are on your side. She was meticulous in her preparation, gathering my financial records from college to present, documenting every job I'd held, every scholarship I'd received, every student loan I'd taken out and repaid. She took statements from former employers and college financial aid officers. The picture that emerged was clear and consistent. I had supported myself financially since I was 18, with no help from my parents. As the court date approached, Natalie made a discovery that changed everything. While researching my parents' financial history as part of our defense, she found records of 2 previous lawsuits they had filed. One against my father's brother over a family business dispute 10 years ago, and another against my mother's cousin regarding inheritance money from my great-aunt. This isn't their first time using legal pressure in a family dispute, Natalie said, showing me the documents. And interestingly, they've never actually won these cases. They've used the threat of prolonged legal action to force settlements. Why didn't I know about this? I asked, stunned by the revelation. The cases were settled out of court with confidentiality agreements. Your uncle and cousin couldn't discuss the terms publicly. She looked at me seriously. Marina, this appears to be a pattern of behavior for your parents. They use the legal system as a tool to get what they want from family members. I felt sick as I absorbed this information. How many other family secrets had been hidden from me? How many other relatives had been pressured and manipulated the way I was being now? The revelation about the previous lawsuits gave our case additional strength, as it established a pattern of my parents using litigation as leverage in family disputes. But it didn't stop the public humiliation or the growing stress as the court date approached. Each day brought new challenges, from Amanda's increasingly dramatic social media posts to my parents' attempts to contact my friends and colleagues to explain their side. I began seeing a therapist to help manage the anxiety and emotional turmoil. Dr. Brenner helped me recognize that what I was experiencing was a form of family abuse, and that my feelings of guilt and uncertainty were normal responses to years of manipulation. Slowly, I began to strengthen my resolve and rebuild my self-confidence, reminding myself daily that standing up for myself was not selfish or wrong. As difficult as this period was, it also revealed unexpected sources of support. My boss continued to be understanding about the time I needed for legal preparation. Several colleagues expressed their support privately, away from the gossip and speculation. My friend Beth became a fierce defender, challenging misconceptions when she encountered them, and providing a sanctuary when I needed to escape the pressure. Most surprisingly, my landlord from my previous apartment, Jack, reached out after being contacted by my parents. Instead of believing their claims, he called me directly. "Marina, I've known you for 3 years as a tenant," he said. "Never late with rent, always respectful of the property and neighbors. Your parents tried to tell me you're irresponsible and deceitful. I know that's not true, and I told them so." These small acts of faith helped me endure the weeks leading up to the court date. Still, nothing could fully prepare me for the experience of sitting in a courtroom, facing my parents and sister across the aisle, about to have our private family dysfunction exposed and judged in a public forum. The night before the hearing, I stood in my kitchen, the kitchen I had painted myself in a cheerful yellow, and wondered how my life had come to this point. How had my simple act of buying a home for myself spiraled into a lawsuit, media attention, and community gossip? The injustice of it burned, but beneath the anger and hurt was a growing certainty that this confrontation had been inevitable. My entire life had been leading to a moment when I would finally have to stand up and say, "Enough." The 2 weeks before the court date were a blur of preparation and discovery. Natalie was thorough, explaining that while the case seemed ridiculous on its face, we needed to be prepared for any argument my parents might present. We gathered bank statements, tax returns, student loan documentation, and employment records dating back to my first job at 16. "We need to establish without any doubt that you've been financially independent," Natalie explained as we organized the documents. "Their claim hinges on the idea that they provided substantial support with strings attached. We'll prove that no such support existed." The evidence was overwhelmingly in my favor. My student loans were in my name alone. My scholarships and grants were earned through my own academic achievements and application efforts. My tax returns showed I had claimed myself as an independent since my first year of college. Even my high school job records demonstrated that I had been working significant hours while maintaining good grades. "What about their claim that there was a verbal agreement?" I asked, still worried despite the strong paper trail we had assembled. "Verbal contracts can be legally binding," Natalie admitted, "but they're notoriously difficult to prove, especially without witnesses or supporting documentation. Your parents would need to demonstrate that both parties understood and agreed to specific terms. From what you've told me, no such conversation ever took place." As part of the discovery process, Natalie had requested my parents' financial records relevant to the case. What we found was revealing and disturbing. Far from being the financially stable, generous parents they portrayed themselves to be, my mother and father were drowning in debt. Credit card statements showed balances in the tens of thousands of dollars, with minimum payments barely covering the interest. There were personal loans from multiple banks, a second mortgage on their house, and even several payday loans with exorbitant interest rates. Most of these debts had accumulated over the past 5 years, coinciding with Amanda's multiple failed college attempts and subsequent unemployment. "They're in serious financial trouble," Natalie said, reviewing the documents. This explains the urgency behind their lawsuit. They're not just trying to get a house for Amanda. They're desperate for financial relief. Further investigation revealed that my parents had taken out loans for each of Amanda's college enrollments. Despite the fact that she had qualified for financial aid she never used because she didn't complete enough credits. They had also funded several business ventures for her, including a luxury pet accessory line that never produced a single product and an organic smoothie delivery service that operated for approximately 2 weeks before folding. Most concerning of all, we discovered credit card applications in my name that I had never authorized. Thankfully, they had been rejected due to address discrepancies, but the attempt to commit identity theft was clear and documented. "Your parents tried to open credit cards in your name," Natalie said, her expression grave. "That's fraud, Marina. It goes beyond a civil dispute about property." I felt physically ill at this discovery. The violation of trust was profound. These were the people who had raised me, who were supposed to protect me from harm, not cause it. How could they justify attempting to steal my identity, potentially ruining my credit and financial future? As disturbing as these revelations were, they strengthened our case considerably. My parents weren't just trying to help Amanda. They were trying to use me to solve their own financial problems. The narrative of family obligation they had been promoting publicly was a cover for financial desperation. Natalie also reached out to my Uncle Robert, my father's brother who had been sued by my parents years earlier. Initially reluctant to get involved, he eventually agreed to meet with us after learning the full situation. Over coffee at a quiet restaurant halfway between our cities, he shared his own experience. "They sued me over my father's auto repair shop," he explained, his voice still tight with old anger. "Your grandfather left it to both of us, but your father hadn't worked there in years. I had been running it, investing my own money to keep it going. When Dad died, your father suddenly wanted half the value of a business he had contributed nothing to." "What happened?" I asked. I couldn't afford a prolonged legal battle. The business was barely staying afloat as it was, so I agreed to pay him a settlement over 5 years. He shook his head. "Nearly bankrupted me, but I kept the shop. Haven't spoken to him since, except through lawyers." My cousin Jennifer had a similar story about my mother's side of the family. After my great-aunt died, leaving Jennifer a modest inheritance, my mother had claimed that there had been a verbal agreement that any inheritance would be shared among all the nieces and nephews. When Jennifer refused, my parents sued, dragging out the legal process until Jennifer, a single mother with limited resources, agreed to give them a portion of the money just to end the ordeal. I always wondered why we never saw Uncle Robert or cousin Jennifer at family gatherings, I said to Natalie after these meetings. Now I know. My parents have been doing this for years, using legal intimidation to extract money from family members, then cutting contact when they get what they want. Or when they don't, Natalie added. Either way, they isolate the people who know the truth about their tactics. This pattern of behavior was consistent with my own experience. My parents had always controlled the family narrative, presenting themselves as generous and self-sacrificing while positioning me as cold and ungrateful. They had isolated me from relatives who might have told me the truth, maintaining their carefully constructed image. With Robert and Jennifer's permission, Natalie prepared to call them as witnesses if necessary. Their testimonies would establish that my parents had a history of making false claims about verbal agreements and using legal pressure to extract financial gain from family members. Our final discovery came just days before the court date, and it was perhaps the most shocking of all. While reviewing financial documents provided during discovery, Natalie noticed references to an educational savings account in Amanda's name that had been emptied 5 years ago. "Your sister had a college fund," she said, showing me the statements. "A significant one. Your grandparents started it when she was born, and your parents contributed to it regularly. But look at these withdrawals." The statements showed a series of large withdrawals that had nothing to do with education. Instead, the money had been used for a luxury cruise, home renovations, and a new car for my mother. All of this occurred around the time Amanda turned 18 and would have been starting college. "They spent her college fund on themselves," I said. the realization dawning slowly. And then they blamed me for not supporting her education. It was the missing piece of the puzzle. My parents hadn't just favored Amanda emotionally, they had actively planned for her future financially. But when the time came, they had spent the money on themselves and then looked for someone else to blame for their failure to provide for her. I had become the convenient scapegoat, the successful daughter who should take responsibility for her sister. Armed with these discoveries, Natalie felt confident about our case. "They have no legal grounds to demand your house or any other financial support for Amanda," she assured me. "In fact, if we wanted to, we could file a countersuit for their attempt at identity theft and potentially pursue criminal charges." I considered this option but ultimately decided against it. As hurt and angry as I was, I didn't want to send my parents to jail. I just wanted them to leave me alone and take responsibility for their own actions and choices. The night before the court date, I sat on my deck, looking at the maple tree that had partly sold me on the house. Its leaves were just starting to change color, hints of orange appearing among the green. In just a few months of homeownership, I had already replaced the worn boards on the deck, planted a small herb garden, and started planning a flower bed for next spring. This was my home, created through years of hard work and sacrifice, and tomorrow I would defend my right to it. I felt a strange calm settle over me. For too long, I had accepted the role my parents had assigned me, the dutiful daughter who would always put her own needs last. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, I would tell my truth, not just to the judge, but to everyone who had been fed the false narrative about me. It was terrifying but also liberating. Whatever happened in court, I knew I would no longer be silenced. The county courthouse was an imposing limestone building with wide steps leading to heavy wooden doors. I arrived early, dressed in a conservative navy suit, my hair pulled back neatly, projecting the image of responsibility and stability that Natalie had advised. My stomach was in knots, but I held my head high as we walked through security and found our assigned courtroom. My parents and Amanda arrived shortly after, accompanied by their attorney, a silver-haired man named Warren Phillips, who had the smooth, confident demeanor of someone accustomed to getting his way. My mother avoided eye contact, but my father stared at me with a mixture of anger and something that looked almost like fear. Amanda kept her gaze fixed on her phone, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, the picture of distress. The courtroom was more crowded than I had expected. The newspaper article had apparently generated public interest in our case, and several rows of seats were filled with curious onlookers, including a reporter I recognized from the local paper. I also spotted Gloria, my mother's former friend, sitting quietly in the back. She gave me a small, encouraging nod. Judge Patricia Harmon entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with short gray hair and piercing eyes. After the formalities, she invited the plaintiffs to present their case. Warren Phillips approached the podium with practiced ease. "Your Honor, this is a case about family obligation and broken promises. Thomas and Diane Walker raised 2 daughters, providing for their needs, supporting their education, and preparing them for successful futures. Their older daughter, Marina, has achieved that success, securing a well-paying job and recently purchasing a home." He paused for effect before continuing. "The Walkers' younger daughter, Amanda, has faced more challenges in establishing herself. The family had a long-standing agreement that Marina would help support her sister once she was financially stable, specifically by providing housing. This agreement was discussed numerous times throughout their upbringing and was understood by all parties." I felt my face flush with anger at these blatant lies, but kept my expression neutral, as Natalie had advised. Phillips continued, painting a picture of my parents as selfless providers who had sacrificed for both daughters, emphasizing their significant financial contributions to my education and early career. Despite these contributions and the clear understanding that family members would support each other, Marina has refused to honor her obligation to her sister. She has purchased a home with room to spare, yet denies Amanda the support she needs to establish herself. We are asking the court to enforce this family agreement, either by transferring ownership of the property to Amanda Walker or by requiring Marina Walker to provide financial compensation equivalent to the property's value. Judge Harmon listened impassively before turning to our table. Miss Jameson, your response? Natalie approached the podium with quiet confidence. Your Honor, the plaintiff's case rests entirely on the existence of an agreement that never occurred. Marina Walker has never agreed, verbally or otherwise, to provide housing for her sister or to transfer property to her. In fact, until she had already purchased her home, she had no indication that such an expectation existed. She methodically laid out the facts. My complete financial independence since age 18, my self-funded education through scholarships, student loans, and multiple jobs, and the absence of any financial support from my parents during my adult life. Far from being the recipient of significant parental support, Miss Walker has been entirely self-sufficient. She worked throughout high school and college, secured her own housing, paid her own tuition through scholarships, loans, and employment, and saved carefully to purchase her modest home. At no point did her parents contribute financially to her education or home purchase. Natalie then addressed the claims of a verbal agreement. The plaintiffs have provided no evidence of any agreement regarding housing for Amanda Walker. They have no witnesses to these alleged conversations, no written documentation, not even text messages or emails, suggesting such an arrangement was discussed, much less agreed to. She concluded by highlighting the unusual nature of the case itself. Your Honor, this case essentially asks whether one adult child can be legally compelled to provide housing for another adult child, against her will and without any prior agreement. The implications of such a precedent would be far-reaching and troubling. Judge Harmon asked several pointed questions about the timing of events and the nature of the alleged agreement before calling the first witness, my father. He took the stand with an air of righteous indignation, swearing to tell the truth while preparing to do anything but. Under questioning from Phillips, my father claimed that from the time I was in high school, there had been an understanding that I would help support Amanda financially once I was established in my career. He described conversations that had never happened, promises I had never made, and financial support they had supposedly provided for my education. We always taught our girls that family takes care of family, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Marina knew that helping her sister was expected. She agreed to it many times over the years. When it was Natalie's turn for cross-examination, she was methodical and relentless. Mr. Walker, you claim to have provided significant financial support for Marina's education. Can you specify exactly how much money you contributed to her college tuition? My father shifted uncomfortably. I don't recall the exact amounts. We helped as needed. Did you write checks directly to the university? No. We gave money to Marina for expenses. Do you have records of these payments? Bank statements showing withdrawals? Checks made out to Marina? We often gave cash, he said, his confidence faltering, for flexibility. I see. And these alleged conversations about Marina providing housing for Amanda, when specifically did they occur? What dates? What locations? Throughout her upbringing, at the dinner table, in the car, family conversations. Were there ever any witnesses to these conversations outside the immediate family? It was a private family matter, he responded stiffly. Natalie continued, Mr. Walker, are you familiar with promissory estoppel, the legal principle that a promise can be enforced if the other party relied on it to their detriment? Somewhat, he replied cautiously. If Marina had indeed promised to provide housing for Amanda, what actions did Amanda take in reliance on this promise? Did she decline other housing opportunities? Did she make career decisions based on this expectation? My father hesitated. Amanda has been living at home, waiting for her sister to fulfill her obligation. So Amanda has taken no affirmative actions based on this alleged promise? She has simply continued living in your home as she has done her entire adult life? She was waiting for her sister to do the right thing, he repeated, his voice rising slightly. Natalie then shifted focus. Mr. Walker, have you ever been involved in other lawsuits against family members? The question clearly caught him off guard. That's not relevant to this case, he said, glancing at his attorney. Your Honor, I believe it goes directly to the credibility of the witness and establishes a pattern of behavior, Natalie argued. Judge Harmon considered briefly. I'll allow it. The witness will answer the question. My father's face tightened. There may have been some legal disagreements in the past. Specifically, did you sue your brother Robert over your father's auto repair business approximately 10 years ago? That was a completely different situation, he said defensively. Did you claim in that lawsuit that there was a verbal agreement regarding the distribution of business assets? There was an agreement, he insisted. My brother violated it. And yet, the court found insufficient evidence of such an agreement, did it not? Phillips objected, but the damage was done. My father's history of claiming verbal agreements that couldn't be substantiated was now part of the record. My mother's testimony followed a similar pattern. She spoke emotionally about family obligation and her expectations for my support of Amanda, but under cross-examination, she couldn't provide specific details or evidence of any agreement. Natalie also questioned her about Amanda's college fund, forcing her to admit that the account had existed and had been emptied for non-educational expenses. So to be clear, Mrs. Walker, Natalie said, you and your husband had saved money specifically for Amanda's education, but you spent it on a cruise, home renovations, and a new car instead? My mother looked trapped. We had financial difficulties at the time. We intended to replace the money. But you never did replace it, did you? Instead, you're now trying to make Marina responsible for supporting Amanda, even though you had saved for Amanda's future, and then spent the money on yourselves. The questioning was brutal but effective. By the time Amanda took the stand, the plaintiff's case was already unraveling. Amanda testified that she had always understood I would provide for her once I was successful, but she couldn't cite specific conversations or agreements, only a general family expectation. Then came the moment that changed everything. Under Natalie's careful questioning about her understanding of the alleged agreement, Amanda suddenly broke down. It's not fair, she sobbed, her carefully applied makeup streaming down her face. They promised me Marina would take care of me. They said her house would be my house too. Who promised you this, Amanda? Natalie asked quietly. Mom and Dad. They said Marina owed it to the family, that she was selfish for keeping her success to herself. She wiped at her eyes. They told me not to worry about finding a job or finishing college because Marina would provide for me. When did they first tell you this? Amanda sniffled. Years ago. I wanted to go away to college, but they said it was a waste of money when Marina would be supporting me anyway. They said her success would be the family's success. Did Marina ever make this promise to you directly? There was a long pause. The courtroom was completely silent. Finally, Amanda shook her head. No, I just believed what my parents told me. Natalie pressed gently. Amanda, were you aware that your parents had established a college fund for you when you were born? Amanda looked confused. What? No. They always said they couldn't afford college for me. That's why I had to drop out. Were you aware that when you were 18, that fund contained over $50,000 earmarked for your education? Amanda's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. $50,000? No, that's not. They said there was no money for college, they said. Her voice trailed off as she looked at our parents, understanding dawning on her face. Amanda, Natalie continued, when did your parents first tell you that you would be moving into Marina's new house? Last year, Amanda replied quietly. When Marina mentioned she was saving for a down payment, they said it was finally happening, that the girls would have a place together. She looked at me directly for the first time. I really believed them. I thought you knew about the plan, too. It was the turning point in the case. Amanda's testimony revealed that not only had there never been an agreement between me and my parents, but they had been manipulating both daughters for years. They had lied to Amanda about the college fund, discouraged her from becoming independent, and promised her access to my resources without my knowledge or consent. By the time it was my turn to testify, the judge's expression had shifted from neutral to increasingly disturbed. I calmly described my experience. Working since 16, paying my own way through college, receiving no financial support from my parents after high school. I explained how I had saved carefully for years to afford my modest home, and how I had no knowledge of any expectation that I would share it with Amanda until after the purchase was complete. Did you ever, at any time, agree to provide housing for your sister or to purchase a home for her benefit? Natalie asked. No, never, I said firmly. The first I heard of this expectation was after I had already bought my house. It was never discussed with me, never agreed to, never even hinted at until after the fact. My Uncle Robert testified about his experience being sued by my father, establishing the pattern of claiming non-existent verbal agreements. My former boss from the grocery store confirmed that I had worked throughout high school, often taking extra shifts to save for college. My university financial aid officer provided records showing I had received no parental contributions for my education. By the time closing arguments began, the outcome seemed increasingly clear. Phillips did his best to salvage his client's case, emphasizing family obligation and moral responsibility, but the facts were overwhelmingly against them. Natalie's closing argument was concise and powerful, focusing on the complete lack of evidence for any agreement and the disturbing pattern of manipulation revealed during testimony. Judge Harmon took only a brief recess before delivering her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I find in favor of the defendant, Marina Walker. The plaintiffs have failed to establish the existence of any enforceable agreement regarding property or financial support. Furthermore, the testimony presented raises serious concerns about the plaintiff's credibility and their manipulation of both their daughters. She looked directly at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Walker, this court is not in the business of forcing one adult child to support another absent, a clear legal obligation. Your daughter Marina has worked admirably to establish herself independently, and she has every right to enjoy the fruits of her labor without your interference. This case is dismissed. She then addressed my parents' attorney. Mr. Phillips, I strongly suggest you counsel your clients regarding the potential consequences of filing frivolous lawsuits and making unsubstantiated claims in the future. As we gathered our belongings to leave, I caught sight of Amanda sitting alone, my parents having already stormed out of the courtroom. She looked lost, the foundations of what she had believed about her life and future visibly crumbling around her. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. She had been a victim of my parents' manipulation too, just in a very different way. The reporter who had written the original newspaper article approached me outside the courthouse, asking for a statement about the ruling. I declined politely, not wanting to prolong the public nature of our family dysfunction. There had been enough pain and humiliation already. It was time to begin healing and moving forward. As I walked to my car with Natalie, I felt a profound mixture of relief, vindication, and sadness. I had won the case, protected my home and my independence, but the cost had been the complete rupture of my family relationships and the public exposure of our most private conflicts. Yet beneath the sadness was something else, something that felt like the first fragile shoots of freedom. The days following the court hearing passed in a blur of emotional processing. The local newspaper ran a follow-up story about the case's dismissal, this time with a very different tone. The reporter who had initially portrayed me as selfish now wrote about troubling revelations of parental manipulation and questions about financial mismanagement. Public opinion, which had been largely against me, began to shift as the full story emerged. My parents retreated into angry silence, refusing to contact me or respond to the single message I sent, suggesting we consider family counseling. Their silence was both painful and relieving. Part of me mourned the relationship we might have had in another reality, while another part recognized that their absence created space for genuine healing. A week after the hearing, I received an unexpected text from Amanda. Can we talk? Just us? We met at a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. She looked different somehow, smaller and less confident, without our parents' influence surrounding her. We sat in awkward silence until our coffee arrived, neither quite sure how to begin a conversation after everything that had happened. I'm sorry, Amanda finally said, staring into her cup. I didn't know they were lying to you too. I really believed you knew about the plan, that you had agreed to it. I know, I replied. You were manipulated just like I was, just in different ways. She looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and confusion. They spent my college fund? There really was money for me to go to school? I nodded. $50,000 that your grandparents and they had saved. The statements were all there in the court documents. Tears welled in her eyes. They told me we couldn't afford college. That's why I kept dropping out, because they made it seem like such a burden, like I was asking too much. She wiped angrily at her cheeks. Then they blamed you for not helping me, when they were the ones who took my chance away. Have you talked to them since the hearing? I asked. She shook her head. They're furious about losing the case. Dad keeps saying the judge was biased, and Mom just cries about how ungrateful we both are. She hesitated. I moved out. I'm staying with a friend temporarily. I couldn't be in that house anymore, not after learning everything. What will you do now? I asked. Amanda looked down again. I don't know. I'm 24 with no degree, no real work experience, and apparently no family support system. It's terrifying. I studied my sister's face, seeing for the first time how our parents' favoritism had harmed her too, just in less obvious ways. They had kept her dependent, discouraged her independence, and set her up for failure in adulthood. Their love had been a cage. What do you want to do? I asked. If you could choose any path forward, what would it be? The question seemed to surprise her. No one's ever really asked me that before, she said thoughtfully. I guess I'd like to finish school. Maybe community college first, since it's been so long since I was in classes. I always wanted to study early childhood education, but Dad said it wouldn't pay enough to be worth it. That sounds like a good start, I said. Have you looked into programs at the local community college? Over the next hour, our conversation shifted from the past to the future. I helped Amanda look up information about the nearby community college on my phone. We discussed financial aid options, employment possibilities that would work around a class schedule, and affordable housing she might be able to afford with a roommate. By the time we parted, something had changed between us. We weren't suddenly best friends, and years of resentment and misunderstanding couldn't be erased in a single conversation. But we had taken the first small steps toward a new kind of relationship, one based on honesty and mutual respect, rather than competition and manipulation. In the months that followed, both Amanda and I began rebuilding our lives without our parents' toxic influence. Amanda enrolled in community college classes and found a part-time job at a daycare center that related to her studies. I focused on making my house truly a home, painting rooms in colors I loved, planting a garden in the backyard, and slowly replacing the worn carpeting with hardwood floors. My relationship with Amanda developed slowly and cautiously. We met for coffee every few weeks, gradually sharing more of our experiences and perspectives. She described the pressure of being the favored child, the suffocating expectations, and the fear of disappointing our parents that had paralyzed her ability to make independent choices. I shared my experiences of feeling constantly inadequate, of working twice as hard for half the recognition, and of the isolation I had felt within our family. It's like they created this competition between us, but they were the only ones who knew the rules, and they kept changing them, Amanda said during one of our conversations. We never had a chance to just be sisters. 3 months after the court case, I hosted a small housewarming party, inviting close friends, supportive colleagues, and, after some consideration, Amanda. I had delayed the celebration, wanting time to settle in and make the space truly mine before sharing it. It was a beautiful early autumn day, perfect for using the deck and backyard I had worked so hard to restore. As friends mingled, enjoying food and conversation, I found myself actually relaxing in my home for the first time since the lawsuit. The legal threat was gone, the community gossip had largely died down, and I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about my well-being. Amanda arrived slightly late, looking nervous but determined. She handed me a small wrapped package. "It's not much, just something for your new place," she said hesitantly. Inside was a framed photograph of a sunrise over Lake Erie that she had taken herself. "I remembered you always liked sunrises," she explained. "You used to get up early to watch them even when we were kids." I was touched that she had remembered this detail about me, something even I had forgotten in the chaos of recent years. It was a small gesture, but it represented something important, an acknowledgement of me as an individual, with my own preferences and history. Later in the evening, Amanda pulled me aside with unexpected news. "I got a job," she announced, a tentative pride in her voice. "A real one, full-time at the daycare where I've been working part-time. They're going to work around my class schedule and help pay for some of my education, since it relates to childcare." "Amanda, that's wonderful," I said sincerely. "And I found an apartment with another student from my early childhood program," she continued. "It's tiny and not in a great neighborhood, but it's mine. Well, half mine. I sign the lease next week." The pride in her voice was unmistakable. These were modest achievements by most standards, but for Amanda, they represented enormous steps toward independence. For the first time in her life, she was making her own decisions and creating her own path without our parents' influence or control. "I'm really happy for you," I said, "and proud of you for making these changes. It's not easy." She nodded, blinking back tears. "I keep thinking about all the years I wasted, believing I couldn't do anything on my own, that I needed them to take care of me forever." She looked around at my home. "You knew better somehow. You got away sooner." "I didn't know better," I admitted. "I just didn't have a choice. They made it clear early on that I was on my own, so I adapted." "You never had the chance to learn that you could stand on your own until now." As guests departed and the evening wound down, Amanda helped me clean up, a comfortable silence between us as we worked. Before leaving, she paused at the door. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not for this party, though that too, but for not hating me after everything. You would have had every right to." "You weren't the one suing me," I pointed out with a small smile. "No, but I believed them when they said you were selfish and owed me. I never questioned why you should be responsible for me. I never stood up for you." She looked down. "I'm sorry for that. We were both manipulated in different ways," I said. "What matters is what we do now." 6 months after the court case, my life had found a new equilibrium. Work was going well, with a supportive boss who had stood by me through the lawsuit drama. My home was becoming a true sanctuary, each improvement making it more comfortable and personalized. I had even started dating again, having put my social life on hold during the legal battle. Amanda and I continued our cautious rebuilding, sharing occasional meals and supporting each other's independence from our parents. She flourished in her classes and her job, discovering abilities and strengths she had never been allowed to develop while under our parents' thumb. Her apartment, though modest, became a source of immense pride, her first true independent achievement. My parents remained distant, occasionally sending manipulative messages through extended family members, but never contacting me directly. I had established clear boundaries, making it known that I was open to rebuilding our relationship only if they were willing to acknowledge their behavior and participate in family counseling. So far, they had refused, preferring to paint themselves as victims of ungrateful children. The lawsuit and its aftermath taught me painful but valuable lessons about family, boundaries, and self-worth. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to step away from those who cannot respect your autonomy. I discovered that family is defined not by blood but by mutual respect and support. Most importantly, I realized that establishing healthy boundaries is not selfish, but essential for genuine relationships to flourish. On the 1-year anniversary of closing on my house, I sat on my deck watching the sunset, reflecting on the tumultuous journey of the past year. The maple tree that had first charmed me now provided perfect shade for my morning coffee. The garden I had planted was flourishing, with late summer tomatoes ripening on the vine. Inside, the rooms had been transformed with fresh paint, new flooring, and furniture chosen specifically for my taste and comfort. This home, which had become the center of so much conflict and pain, had also become the foundation of my healing and growth. By fighting for it, I had also fought for myself, for my right to the fruits of my own labor and the boundaries necessary for my well-being. The cost had been high, but the freedom I now felt was worth every difficult moment. As the sky turned from orange to deep purple, I made a silent promise to myself. I would continue building a life based on authenticity and healthy boundaries. I would nurture relationships that uplifted rather than depleted me. And I would always remember that true family supports your growth rather than exploiting your success. The house that had almost been taken from me had become more than property. It was a symbol of independence, of standing firm in the face of manipulation, and of the peace that comes from being true to yourself, even when others demand otherwise. My parents had taken me to court for buying a house, but in fighting for my home, I had found my voice and my freedom. That was a victory no court could ever take away. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content, and share with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it brings some comfort or clarity to those facing their own difficult family situations.